call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, April 16, 2018. Clerk, call the roll, please. Here. 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 No audience comments, trustee comments, discussion. Item number 1, Mr. Toth.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. Item number 1 on Committee of the Whole for tonight is a variance request for a fence variance. The property owner at 511 Sharon Lane is requesting a variance to allow a 6-foot fence in what would typically be considered their rear yard. The property is situated along Sharon Lane at the entrance to the Hickory Court cul-de-sac and also around the Hickory Court cul-de-sac bulb, which I'll pull up here. So you'll see in the staff report, the property itself can be classified as a number of different lots. I would classify it more as a peninsula type lot, as it technically faces 3 rights of way. Again, the Hickory Court cul-de-sac bulb, the entrance to Hickory Court cul-de-sac, and also Sharon Lane. The house faces Sharon Lane, and the backyard faces the Hickory Court cul-de-sac bulb.
Can you go back to the other slide? Which one was it?
This is one here. This property right here. So I'm hoping you can see this okay. The area shown in yellow here, just follow the cursor, can be done at 6 feet in height. The area in blue, because it faces 30 feet from the property line adjacent to a right-of-way, I made the interpretation it can only be 4 feet in height. So the portion in blue is the request to go to 6 feet in height, which is this line here. So there's no fence going along the front yard of Sharon Lane, no fence off of the entrance to the Hickory Court cul-de-sac, but coming off the rear of the home, he's looking to do a 6-foot fence behind the house. Now, this did go to the April 3rd Plan Commission for discussion. They did recommend approval unanimously based upon the plan that you see here in front of you tonight.
Mike, would you repeat that? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, this did go to public hearing before the Plan Commission on April 3rd. They unanimously recommended approval of the variance subject to this plan here. The plan here shows that the fence will be on the inside of the landscaping that is adjacent to the Hickory Court cul-de-sac. I don't have a problem saying that tonight, but the fence would go behind this tree line here. The property owner is here tonight to answer any questions you might have as well. And I'm just looking to get some feedback from the board regarding this petition.
So 6 foot in the rear. Can you explain that to me again?
Yeah, this blue line here, anytime, basically.
That's the side, right? Right now you're pointing at the side of the house?
No, this is the rear of the house. This is the front of the house is here. This is Sharon Lane. So Sharon Lane's here. The rear of the house is here. And it abuts the cul-de-sac bulb. This lot is very atypical. The subdivision ordinance actually would prohibit a lot like this, given the distance that's required of a cul-de-sac entryway, meaning you would probably be a couple lots deep before you got to a cul-de-sac bulb, which would try to eliminate this sort of position or predicament where you would have it facing basically 3 rights of way. So by design, this lot is actually prohibited. It doesn't make a difference for this case tonight. But the petitioner is looking to have a 6-foot fence in the rear yard. I believe he has a dog and wants to contain the animal. And again, going from a 4-foot fence to a 6-foot fence.
So is it going to be 6 foot all the way around, 6 feet back, 4 feet on the other side?
Coming off the side of the house here, if you can follow the cursor, this is allowed to be 6. So he's only coming off the side of the house here, and then heading, which would be actually he's heading north at this point, at 6 feet as well. So basically, this is the only area around the house that would be fenced in.
The yellow line or the blue line?
The yellow line and the blue line. That's where the fence would be. The yellow line dictates where he can do 6 feet by code. The only variance portion is the blue line.
Did any of the neighbors have a problem with that? I mean, would it be obstructing a view around all the way out or traveling?
No, actually, given the plan that he submitted, originally the plan was to have the fence on the outside of the tree line here. These little circles indicate the tree line. But after speaking with the neighbors, he moved it in the interior of the tree line, so that way it would not be prevalent within the cul-de-sac itself. And I'll drop this and show you an actual picture of the property.
I think that's a great idea.
And once the neighbors learned that he was going in the inside of this tree line here, they did not have an issue. We had one person show up to the public hearing, more or less just kind of questioning where it was going. And once that gentleman found out it was going in the inside of the tree line, he did not have an issue either. So the fence itself would be concealed here. So you kind of have to ask yourself, he could go 4 foot by right in front of these trees, but given the situation, he's going 6 feet behind the trees.
6 feet, that's not likely. I've seen that, because they don't conform well to the neighborhood, that my only concern.
I'm okay with it. My only concern would be if somebody decides to take down arborvitae someday, then that big fence will be right there. So.
Yeah, it'd still be about 9 feet off the property line.
So
That sort of was my interpretation. I did go a little conservative with my interpretation, given the fact that it is in a cul-de-sac and there would be multiple homes facing the fence. There are situations along like Hart Road where typically if it faces a right-of-way, it's 4 feet. But given the fact that it abuts Hart Road and there are no other homes in North Aurora looking at that, I do allow them to go to 6 feet. But I was a little more conservative with my interpretation here. I could have even said that he could go 6 feet because it's the back of his house. In the rear yard, you can have a 6 foot fence, but because it was adjacent to the right of way, I made the 4 foot discretion.
I'm okay with the way it is.
And again, it would be subject to this plan here. So if the variance would be approved per the Plan Commission recommendation, it would be behind the tree line here. I only say that so you don't approve a 6 foot variance and it gets put on the outside of the tree line. It is tied directly to this plan.
It appears we have agreement, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 2, Mr. Toth.
All right. Feel free to answer any questions or jump in if you feel the need. Chapter 8.4 of the zoning ordinance establishes design standards and guidelines for commercial development. These standards were adopted when the new zoning ordinance was adopted in January 2013. So these standards did not previously exist in the zoning ordinance. As you'll see when you look through the provisions, which I've included in here, it contains provisions regarding exterior building finishes, fenestration, building articulation. The way it currently reads now is that when I see the word shall in the zoning ordinance, that means it is a requirement. So what I'm looking to do here is kind of take a turn and make, instead of having rigid guidelines, rigid standards, I want to transform this into more of a guideline for a commercial development. And I bring that up because there are some examples out there where we've had people that have come in with building materials and they fit with all the building materials within the PUD, but because they were built after the new zoning ordinance was adopted, they would technically have to get a variance to have the same materials that are of the buildings surrounding that development itself. So again, what I'm looking to do here is basically take it from a rigid rigid standard and make it a design guideline. This did go before the Plan Commission for a workshop session on February 6th, and they did go to a public hearing on April 3rd. So the Plan Commission has seen this twice. The only apprehension that they had was that the village would not have teeth through the ordinance to basically require that somebody do something. But I believe that we do actually have merit already to require or suggest that we do require certain building standards, namely in the site plan approval process. Any new commercial building or any new commercial building that is an addition above 25% of the existing floor area has to go through the site plan approval process. We also have the special use process, and through those processes, we actually have the ability to establish conditions that see fit to the actual development itself. And I'll give you a couple examples here. When we did the Opus East in 2015, if you recall, that property faces the corner or the intersection of Orchard Gateway and Randall Road. Originally, that did not include the office facade facing that corner. The office facade was actually facing to the northwest. But through the site plan approval process, the Plan Commission made a recommendation that the office facade be placed on the northeast corner. So again, that was a condition of approval. So While it was not in the design guidelines, we do have teeth through these certain processes to make them requirements of approval. I actually met with a person that interested in doing a TIF facade grant, and they were looking to do paint. And when I suggested that there are paint provisions in here, going to more neutral tones, more earth tones, and away from the high intensity primary colors, I did say that those would be a conditions of approval, that you go and use an earth tone or one of the actual paint methods or tones mentioned in the business district standards, which are in here today. This is just at first glance, it's a lot of information here. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We can do this as a series of workshops if you want, or if you feel that we can move forward with this, I'll leave it to your discretion, but again, I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Well, I will say, I mean, like what I'm seeing in Matthew, and I think, some of these jobs would definitely be an improvement. I think it's a little bit more upscale, higher quality feel. So looking through this today, I mean, I'm excited about the new guidelines.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too that the guidelines do exist already, but these are just keeping the guidelines as they are, but making them as opposed to making them a requirement, that it is actually more of a guideline in itself. And that's
Mike, what would be the purpose of making a suggestion rather than
it's more process oriented. When you have a development coming in or redevelopment, and they want to do let's just say they want to do EAFs, which is a finishing material. If the code actually says that it's a requirement, that means they would have to get a variance to do that type of building material. Even if the entire development around it has that same building material, because it was built now when these were adopted, it would have to get a variance. When I look at the standards for a variance, I think it's sort of hard to tie in a building material to the way our variances are established in the zoning ordinance. So as opposed to making it a rigid standard, making it more of a guideline. So if it comes in and it goes through an internal review control with staff, with our outside consultants, and there is something that we see that needs to be addressed, even if it hasn't even gone to the Plan Commission or Village Board yet, we can point out our guidelines and say that, given this building facade, we're going to make this a recommendation approval that you do this. And it allows them the opportunity to either change it before they submit or take the chance to go through with it, and it would become a condition of approval.
Essentially, it allows us to be less bureaucratic. It allows us to actually work with the developers coming in. Building materials change all the time, but our codes don't. So sometimes you'll have a national carrier come in and want to build something, and the material won't even match what we allow. So we have to go through a variance for a use that every board member, every staff member would be like, this is a great use for the village. But we still have to make it go through an actual process because our code isn't kept up with the time of building materials.
I guess I have a question about giving up the control from the village in terms of kind of monitoring or keeping in line with what we like to do as we go forward.
Yeah, that was the same concern that the Plan Commission had, and that's why, I want to reiterate the fact that I believe we still do have control through those processes, through the site plan approval process. We can make any recommendation on a building color, of an architectural feature, or anything on the site plan itself, landscaping. We still have all that control to make those conditions of approval, I believe.
I think this is a situation where we don't do it much at the committee level, where we actually have a bona fide workshop type setting. Sometimes we might do, let's say, in a budget discussion or whatnot, we go back and forth a little bit. But this was how Mike had proposed it several times to the Plan Commission, that it's a fluid conversation. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to the board after this. It could go back to committee of the whole if you have ideas, or if you want to sit on it, take a look at it, come up with some other thoughts, some additions. There's other ways to do it. Mike's already talked to Attorney General about this, but I'd like to also see if there is a concern that Kevin might have on teeth, that we can go back and see if there is stuff that we can put in practice.
When I asked the Plan Commission too, when this was drafted into the zoning ordinance 2013, I don't feel like there was much thought put behind it and what the ramifications meant when I had to deal with the developer on a daily basis in regards to timing of development. There was also a lot of discrepancies in here. I mean, you have the same code, it's only a couple pages long, but one part says that the ground floor facade must maintain 50% transparency, while the other portion on the next page says 60%. So it's inconsistent. I don't think it was very well thought out. So I'm basically just trying to hone in on it a little bit to today's standards and architecture. I did actually speak to a couple architects on this, and they found it a little humorous that we didn't allow certain materials, curtain glass, things of that sort. So again, trying to open it up to allow for creativity in the building design process. We have some very nice buildings in town, namely some unique restaurants that if these standards would adhere to them, they would have had to get special approval just to do their building facades. So what this does, this allows us to take a look and say, if something doesn't look right, we can either at the staff level make comment of it, or the plan commission can comment of it, or the village board can make comment of it, make it a condition of approval. So I believe we still have the teeth in the ordinance moving forward with this.
Yeah, I like the fact that, you know, we want to be business friendly, and I think it's just one more tool to attract people to come in and be current with the times. And everything's the same as it was 30 years ago, so great job.
Thank you.
It gives us more flexibility. And that's what, everybody in agreement? Yeah. You got your marching papers?
Thank you.
Item number 3. And
Thank you. Item number 3 is on the agenda, in case there were any follow-up questions from last budget presentation, last committee of the whole meeting. We only have a couple small changes to the budget at this point. The main one is just a carryover of some water fund maintenance projects related to replacement of the MIOX units and removal of the backwash sludge cleanout projects. Those projects are probably not going to get done by May 31st, so we'll just have to rebudget them into the next budget year, about $215,000 there. The only other item was there's some uncertainty regarding what one of the vehicles might cost due to maybe some prices of steel and different things. So the 6-wheeler, we're looking at maybe increasing that budget by about $15,000 at this point, but that's still under discussion. So beyond that, I really don't have any detailed presentation. I certainly have the information from last week if there are any questions. We're set to have a public hearing on the budget, the first meeting in May, and then it'll be up for village board approval at the second meeting in May. So if there was any questions at all, we're happy to discuss them right now. Okay.
everything goes good.
All right. Thank you.
Very good. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.